Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Gephardt, and welcome to my podcast. We call it simply The Bill Gephardt Show. And first, how would you like to talk to a guy who says he's going to reform the entire Utah legislature? That's right. We'll talk to the Democratic candidate for governor, Chris Peterson. Also, the first woman sheriff in all of Utah, Rosie Rivera of Salt Lake County. We'll talk to her about what she thinks of all this protesting and where policing is going to go. Also, two expert professors who will give us some insight and some provocative, thought provoking stuff, I guess, about what we're to do in all of this lonely time during the pandemic. And I want to thank all the people who make this podcast possible and who are supporters of local journalism. Dream Dental Implants and Dr. Brian Hendricks, home of the revolutionary 4-on-4 implant. I spent a day watching Dr. Hendricks and his team while they performed this procedure, and I was amazed by what I saw. Dream Dental Implants in downtown Salt Lake City. Also, ES Solar Utah. I have gone solar in my home, and it really is a no down payment situation with no out of pocket. It is safe, it is clean, it's efficient, and now I personally pay less for my home's electricity every month. One Wire Fiber, where Adam Sessions and his team delivers cutting edge phone and communications products and services to businesses across Utah and across the West, with the goal of doing it better than anyone else and doing it affordably. And All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air, where owner-operator John Holland and his ever-growing team of professionals are ready to show you how to do your own plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. All right, my guest right now is the Utah Democratic candidate for governor. It's Chris Peterson. And if you haven't heard his name a whole lot in the past, I think you're going to start hearing it in the next few months as we work our way up toward November. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Bill. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my message. And I'm really excited to speak with you and your audience.
Well, the whole thing that I think a lot of Utah people, I want to get into your message here. Maybe this is a way of getting into your message, is how are you going to break through? We have been a Republican state since the last governor was Scott Matheson, and that was in about 1977 through 1990, the last Democratic governor. How are you going to break through this thing?
Well, Bill, we've never had a time that's been quite like we're facing today. You know, right now, first off, we've had an enormous amount of time where Republicans have been in control, and a lot of people, I think, are open to and ready for the potential to have some change. And it's inevitable in human society when one group has power for a long period of time. Oftentimes, that can tend to drift away from their
On
roots.
either side, that's right.
Yeah, and I think we really need to recognize that a lot of people believe that some of our leaders in the state, the politicians, are not really listening to the public anymore. You can't have any better examples than the 3 ballot measures that passed in the last
Exactly, marijuana, and I don't know the third one. Let's see, the marijuana, the sales tax, the food tax, and what was the third that you're talking about?
So there was Medicaid expansion. There was fair legislative redistricting, anti-gerrymandering, and then medical marijuana supervised by physicians. And then even after those 3, we also had the ballot initiative to repeal the food tax.
Yes, that's right.
Those overwhelmingly were inconsistent with what the current leadership of the state was advocating, but there were large majorities of people who were trying to push the state in another direction. If we can pass Medicaid, anti-gerrymandering, and medical marijuana, Bill, a Democrat can win in Utah in 2020.
Okay, what are you going to do to get out there? You got any money?
Well, I'm doing the best to raise it. That is one of the biggest challenges, I'll be candid. And the fact that we had a coronavirus pandemic and the largest recession that we've seen, frankly, since the Great Depression, that hasn't made it any easier. But I do believe that there is appetite for change. We are raising money. We are competing, and we're going to give it everything we've got.
And what's the first thing you want to do when you get elected?
Well, the first thing I want everybody to do,
or a couple things, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to be listening to the public, and I'm going to be protecting those ballot measures that we've already passed. And that's a real distinction between me and my opponent. I'm going to make sure that the public gets its way on anti-gerrymandering, on medical marijuana, and on the Medicaid expansion, I'm going to do everything I can, not just to not increase food taxes. I think that we need to decrease food taxes. I'm also going to be very focused on trying to do more to help our public school system. We are dead last in the country, 51st in the nation after all 50 states in the District of Columbia, and per pupil public school funding, and the public does not support that. We need to do more to make sure we've got resources to build an economy for the future, a pipeline of jobs through our public schools, our community colleges, technical colleges, and universities into great paying, high-tech jobs for the future. I also think we've got to make progress on our air pollution problem. It's only going to get worse as our population is growing. We can't let that go any further.
How do we do that? That seems to be anti-business when you're, not necessarily, of course, but some would argue that's anti-business when you start to clean up the air.
No, that's just not true, Bill. That's just not true.
Yeah.
We have some real options now that are pro-business and are good for the environment as well. Let me give you just a few examples. I know we don't have a lot of time, but first
we do.
All right. Well, Tier 3 gasoline has lower particulate emissions. It costs not that much more, about the same as regular gasoline. Okay. In a state where we have natural inversions and a natural air pollution problem, we've got to transition to Tier 3 gasoline. And there may be some transition time there, some incentives we need to put in place, but it's worth it. Also, on the future, we have plug-in hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles that are coming online that are even better than some of the internal combustion engines. And the prices are coming down. We've got to speed our transition away from internal combustion engines towards plug-in hybrid and electric vehicles to make sure that as our population continues to grow, we're not turning into air quality like Mexico City. Also, I'd add, there's so much more potential out there for a clean, renewable energy that really is becoming cost effective and is good for business. Just give you a couple of examples. We could do much more to have distributed rooftop solar power on our residences, our businesses, all those warehouses that we're building and currently exist. Many of them don't have solar power on top of them. Each one could be a big solar power plant. And also our government buildings, our schools could have solar power plants, and we could have geothermal energy. There's a great geothermal energy project that's just waiting to be developed in Carbon County to try to offset some of the losses that we've seen as coal has become less competitive. And there's enormous commercial solar power reserves out there ready to be tapped with clean energy jobs in Tooele County.
It works for me. The solar stuff works for me. I put it on my house, and my total electric needs are now less. All the money I'm paying for my electric service is actually less, and it's environmentally friendly, and on and on.
That's great.
Should you be elected in November, you're going to plop right down, I believe, in the middle of this pandemic. So let me ask you, how have we done so far, and what would you do, if anything, different? Or are we doing just great?
Oh, Bill, we're not doing just great. Our country and our state have some serious problems. It's a little bit even hard to talk about. Everybody needs to bear in mind how many people have passed away. We're coming up on 130,000 Americans. That's more Americans that died during the First World War. It's more Americans.
That's right. But what about Utah? Because it seems to me we took this seriously as a state early, and I wonder, but maybe we're not taking it as seriously now, or maybe we are, or what would you do differently?
Well, we do have some challenges here in the state. Our numbers have been spiking. The past few days, they've plateaued in terms of new cases just a bit. But I also am a little concerned that the number of tests that we've been offering has declined significantly. We've closed some of our testing locations in some of the lowest income, most vulnerable neighborhoods in Salt Lake County. And that may be giving us a false sense of security about how much spread is in the community. The number of hospitalizations has been spiking over the past few weeks. What do we need to do differently? First off, we've got to get past this notion that wearing a mask is a political statement, or that there's something wrong with it, or that it's unhealthy. Physicians have been wearing masks all day, worked for a generation.
I know. It's ridiculous. The stuff that's out there, that masks can be fatal. You can, or something, you can, if you breathe in a mask too much, it can kill you. But I've never known a physician wearing a mask in a hospital to be injured in any way. Go ahead.
people need to start getting their information from folks that know about how this works, not just the murky corners of conspiracy theories on the internet. We've got to have leadership that gets us focused on doing the things we need to do to drive these infection rates down. That means more testing, more contact tracing, more preventative measures. One of the things I'm most upset about is, we know that the best version of a mask is an N95 respirator mask. They're a little bit harder to produce, and there's a scarcity of them. This far into a pandemic that's killed 130,000 Americans, we should have redirected some of our manufacturing capability to make sure that everybody in America that wants an N95 mask should be able to have one. We need to get that done long before I come into office in January. If it's not, that's one of the first things I'll focus on.
All right, Chris Peterson, Democratic candidate for governor. Tell me a little bit about you. What do you do when you're not being a lawyer, or tell me a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids, and one of the great things, silver linings for me about the pandemic is that my wife is an attorney too. She goes off to work, and I'm taking care of my kids while I'm running for governor. So they've been putting up with me doing this sort of thing and coming around to some events with me, and it's the most important thing in my life by far. I love being a father, some of the things I'm interested in. Well, I've spent most of my life just throwing myself into trying to be a public servant. I've spent years being a consumer advocate. Worked in the federal government, trying to return refunds and restitution to people who had been taken advantage of by companies, debt collectors, payday loan companies, and sometimes banks. And managed to return my team that I work with in Washington nearly $12 billion in refunds and restitution to people all across the country. I really do have a passion for that, and that's what I've spent most of my life doing.
I know, but what do you do when you take your tie off?
Well, I spend a lot of time with my family.
All right.
I read a lot. I guess I'm a little bit of a nerd.
That's all right. That's all right. All right. Well, it's great to talk to you, Chris, and we'll stay in close touch as the campaign progresses, because I want to talk to you again as new issues come up.
Well, Bill, I sure appreciate that. And I know that it's an uphill climb. Sometimes people think that I'm naive or foolish for even trying it. But the reason I'm in this race is because I care so much about people. We need to do a better job listening to the people and giving them a government that gives everyone a chance to succeed. I also want to mention, I am a pro-business, business-friendly, moderate Democrat that will do everything I can to grow our economy. So I hope folks out there will listen and give me a chance. I think it's time for change in Utah. A little bit of competition is good in our free enterprise economy. It's also good in our government.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Chris Peterson, Democratic candidate for governor of the state of Utah. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bill. You have a good afternoon.
All right. Okay, I wanted to invite to the broadcast the fellow you see on your screen right now. That's Chad Stokes. Hello, Chad.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm fine. I wanted to bring you here because I think there's some issues about solar energy. I have solar energy on my home, and I wanted to talk to you because, in fact, you guys at ES Solar installed this stuff in my home. And people take a look at it, and they ask me about it because it is curious. And they say, well, how much does it cost is one of the questions. And I said about $30,000. Well, the end result was not $30,000, but that was on the original contract. And that scares people. Have you found that to be the case?
We have. And I think a lot of people hear that solar is expensive and that $30,000 is expensive. But, Bill, when you consider what the federal tax credit is, which is 26% of the cost of the system they're going to get back in a credit, and then our great state of Utah gives families going solar $1,600. That's about $9,400. It's $9,400.
That's what happened to me. My actual cost after all that stuff got down to $20,000, from $30,000 to $20,000, yes, and some change. Keep going.
Yeah, so $9,400. It's just barely over $20,000 net cost. And when you amortize that over a 20-25 year term without anything out of pocket, Bill, that no longer becomes expensive to families when they understand that. And especially when we're able to trade one bill that they have on average to Rocky Mountain now and actually lessen that bill, match it if it's competitive or lessen it.
Let's explain that, because that has happened to me. I am paying less now for my total electricity needs. I've not been through a whole summer yet, but I'm paying less now for my total electricity needs. I was paying $300 or something. Now to the electric company, I'm paying in the neighborhood of $25. But again, and when you analyzed, you talked about the 3 tiers. The more electricity I use, the more it costs to use it.
Yeah. So Rocky Mountain Power is not like Costco, where we can go buy, quantities of items and get a better deal. In fact, with Rocky Mountain Power, there are 3 tiers that they charge consumers. And the first tier is going to be the least expensive power. But here's the problem is you only get to use 400 kilowatt hours in the first tier before it jumps to the second tier. And then you have between 400 and 1,000 kilowatts in tier 2 before it jumps up. And anything over 1,000 kilowatts, you're paying the maximum amount for your power, which in the summer months is very, very easy. In fact, probably 4 to 6 months a year, most families are in that top tier throughout the month, paying the most per kilowatt for power.
Well, I'm going to let you know how it is at the end of the year, because it's an interesting experiment to see how we did for the whole year. I financed this thing at some low rate of what was it, 2.99?
2.99. Yeah, you got a great rate. You bet.
Yeah, and so you can pay cash. I make more money in other investments, so I'd rather have the 2.99. But the point is that I think it's over 20 years or 25 years I did this, and the solar panels are guaranteed for that period of time. But for the 20 or 25 years, the monthly payment is plus the amount I pay, the $25 or so I now pay to Rocky Mountain Power. The aggregate, the composite of all that stuff is less for my total electricity needs. It seems like a no-brainer to me anyway. What do you think?
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. In fact, that's the case with most of the families we help. The goal is to eliminate their power bill with Rocky Mountain Power. Our goal would be to have a connection fee plus some taxes on that with Rocky Mountain Power, and the rest of the payment they make each month. First of all, fix that payment so families aren't, subject to and at risk with these rate increases that we're seeing every year, but fix that cost and it be less than they were paying on average to Rocky Mountain Power. And most of the time, Bill, that's the case. The factors that kind of play into that is a home that's a good fit, that we can fit enough panels on to give them 100% offset and eliminate their power bill with Rocky Mountain Power. And then, of course, qualifying for these tax credits and incentives that I mentioned earlier that help significantly reduce that system cost down to a net cost after tax credits and incentives.
That's right. It seems like a no-brainer. I think the reason I chose you guys was because you do it from cradle to grave. A lot of companies, they send a busload of salespeople out and they bring their contracts back, and then that goes to somebody else, and eventually gets to engineers, and eventually gets to somebody who installs it, and somebody else who does the warranty. And it all kind of can get lost, which has been, in my opinion, a problem in the solar industry. You've got a lovely model there where you do it from beginning to end. How do we reach you?
Very, very simple. We're located in Layton. That's our corporate office. And you can also find us online at essolar.com. I've got energy technicians throughout the state that are just absolutely fabulous, that can answer all your questions and your needs and see if we can help you. And if solar is a good fit for your home and for your family there to take advantage of these great benefits. So we would love to help. essolar.com. Please reach out, or you can find us on Gephardt Daily as well. Bill, thank you for the opportunity to come on today and share a few things about solar with families in Utah.
You bet. And just as a final word from me, I know you turned down or recommend against some people getting solar because it just would not benefit them.
We do. And I think that's very different than other companies out there, the sales companies you mentioned. It's not the first to tell a family if it doesn't make sense for them, but it does for most. And we have some things coming up at the end of the year and some changes next year as well that have really created some urgency. And so for those families considering solar, now is a great time. I would recommend looking into it sooner than later and seeing if we can help you and you are a good fit.
All right. Chad Stokes, one of the owners at ES Solar at essolar.com. Thanks for joining us. Joining us now, Rosie Rivera, the sheriff of Salt Lake County. Thanks for joining us, Rosie.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure tonight. I just want to talk to you about some of the current events going on, not only around Salt Lake County and around Utah to some degree, but around the country. Did you ever expect a climate like this, with the protests all emanating from something out of Minnesota, this kind of rage, if you will?
Well, we went through this years and years ago, about 20 years ago, but nothing like this, especially at the same time we're going through a pandemic.
I mean, some of us, yeah, both, right? A pandemic and protesting and some vandalism. What do you think of these protesters? I mean, are most of them, I guess what I mean by well-meaning is that they are there for a cause and a purpose, and not just to go out and raise hell. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two groups. There's protesters who want to protest peacefully and they have a message. And then there are violent protesters who are there just to create chaos for everybody. And that's what we experienced in Salt Lake City.
Sometimes I wonder if some of even the well-meaning people don't know where to turn with their frustration, and they're just angry. And so they wind up striking out, doing things like tipping over police cars or whatnot. What do you think?
Well, and it's interesting because those folks have been arrested and they're going to see significant prison time. And so I hope other people are paying attention and know that you have to have law and order, but at the same time, it's okay to protest peacefully.
Okay, and what does defund the police mean? Because we've, been hearing this, and I cannot imagine it literally means defund the police. I can't imagine any sane person living in any society to want absolutely no security. So what does defund police mean to you?
Well, to me, it means that people want to take money away from the police departments and allocate it to other areas that they think would be more successful. I don't agree with that necessarily, because I think that the police departments need more money. We have been asking for more money. But at the same time, there are programs that maybe police shouldn't be doing. And, we are not we're social workers. We have to be therapists. We have to be chaplains and medical. All these things come in under the role of law enforcement. And, sometimes there are programs that could be better served elsewhere. But that's what we're working on, and we have been for several years trying to figure those pieces out.
And sometimes I wonder if we're moving fast enough for all of us when, one of these things erupt like that. I mean, there has been some progress. We now have officers wearing cameras on their shoulders and on their chests, and even sometimes, up above on their hats. I mean, that is some progress anyway. From my standpoint, and this is just me, I think it's all about training, because I think law enforcement are special people. If I get busted for something as simple as speeding, going 70 and a 50, and I go to court and I say, Your Honor, I was going the speed limit, and the officer says, oh, no, we clocked him at 70 miles an hour. We're going to believe the sworn officer over me. That's just the way it works. I'm not objecting to that, but it makes police officers special people. And with that ought to come a whole bunch of training. And I know law enforcement, we're just human beings, but I don't think you're allowed to get angry and act out like that. Are you?
No, we are not, and we do have policies against it. And I wouldn't say it's only training, though, because what happened to George Floyd, the officer involved in that, I don't think you could have trained him in any way to make him understand that is totally unacceptable. But being in law enforcement for 27 years, I have seen where we're only required to go through 40 hours of training a year, mandatory, and we probably could use double that type of training to ensure that, we have the tools to do the job.
I think so. I have been treated in a unfairly rough fashion in various cities, not Salt Lake necessarily, although in Salt Lake as well, by police officers, where some guys just in a horrible mood. I mean, contrast that with the fact that I get a police officer who is in a really, really good mood, and they're just wonderful people. But I have been treated unfairly, I suppose. I've never been arrested, but I've been treated unfairly. And I think a lot of people might have been treated unfairly from time to time when they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time with a bad mood on somebody's part? And is there a way to just train that away, or is that just something you have to deal with as the head of law enforcement? Yeah.
We do have policies in place that you can't be rude to the public, and those policies just have to be enforced. We also need supervisors taking a look at that, because if you had somebody on your shift, it would be up to the supervisor to identify that and make sure that those type of things don't happen. But they do. I mean, we've had cases like that. We just had one up in the canyons recently where we had a unified officer that lost his temper, and we took quick action, and he no longer works in the canyons. That's what we need to do, is hold our officers accountable, but also understand the situations we're in. Some things are split second, and our training does kick in on those situations.
Okay. Whether you are in favor of unions or not in favor of unions, the police officers' unions, generally speaking, are really getting spanked by the public right now. And frankly, I agree with the criticism against those unions. It's not unions. You usually think about working conditions and benefits and pay, but there's the stick togetherness that can make the members of the public crazy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've worked with unions throughout my career, and I actually was on the Fraternal Order of Police Board, and I've seen where unions have held officers accountable.
Okay. Things have changed a lot since you came on board as a sheriff's deputy. How long have you been doing this? Not as a sheriff, but as a deputy?
Since 1993.
And in 1993, if I have my numbers right, you were one of 9 female police officers out of about 300, right, at the sheriff's office?
Yes.
So things have changed.
They have. Females are coming up into law enforcement, and now we are seeing more females in leadership positions.
Like, for example, who I'm talking to right now.
Yeah, first female sheriff in the state of Utah, and we have a female chief in West Valley. And I have a couple of female chiefs on the sheriff's side as well.
What do you think about in regard to that? You're not only a female, but a minority. Mm-hmm. And is there institutional sexism or institutional racism that needs to be dealt with in law enforcement?
So I've been really fortunate in my career. I haven't experienced that, as I came along. I think once I became a chief of police I worked in Riverton as a precinct chief. Sure. That's when I started to see a little bit of contention because I was the only female at the table. So it didn't happen until I got to the top. So that's kind of an interesting fact. I
think it's great. Personally speaking, I think it's great to have more minorities and more females. I think it's better representative of the community.
Well, on the sheriff's side, we have done really well with hiring diversity, because I do believe that the more that you understand your communities and they're diverse, so we should be diverse, that we're more effective in policing. And on the sheriff's side, we're at 27% diversity for a large department.
What does that mean, diversity? Is that, what are you talking about, females or minorities, or what are we?
Minorities and females.
Okay. What about that rat's nest over there called the Salt Lake County Jail, where there are these lawsuits coming out and accusations flying? How much of a focus of that of you?
Well, I wouldn't call it a rat's nest.
All right.
For one thing, I'm very, very proud of what's going on at the Salt Lake County Jail. And in the last 3 years, we have made a ton of changes there. We have changed the culture. We've changed the leadership. We have added many programs, and we're very proud of what's going on at our Salt Lake County Jail.
What are these culture changes you've made?
Well, we added the MAP program to help those who come into the facility that are suffering from overdoses or drug addiction. It's to help them. We were one of the first jails in the nation, and we just brought that in last year. Changing the culture matters, Bringing in more diversity matters, and changing the leadership. Because we wanted a philosophy of that we care about the people that are in our jail. They are our community.
Okay.
And we've added hydration stations. We have various suggestions that we've done to help with suicide prevention, such as we no longer provide sheets. We now have thick blankets so they can't hurt themselves. And we're consistently looking at those type of programs or changes in the facility to make this better.
All right, one more thing. What's the deal with Taylorsville? They suddenly wanted out of their contract and go off by themselves. I don't know exactly why, but they say because of their current political climate, and I suppose that has to do with the protesting and whatever is going on. But what do you think of that?
Well, they didn't discuss that portion with us yesterday, but they did meet with me yesterday about 3 o'clock. I met with Mayor Overson, and she said that they wanted more local control.
Yes.
So with the Unified Police Department, we have 11 partners that are members of our UPD, and that is our governing board. So that's who governs the UPD. So when a precinct like Taylorsville wants to make decisions at their precinct level, they can only do that in the patrol precinct. They can't do it over, the whole UPD. They'd have to get the vote of the board. And that's what she told me, that it was local control, that's what they want.
All right. Well, that certainly shouldn't hurt anything. You are working pretty hard, aren't you? What do you do when you're not working? Did you go play sometimes?
Well, I'm a grandma of 6, and I'm very close to my family. I actually have a very, very large family, so I'm never bored, and I do golf. And yes, I love to get out there or ride ATVs and have fun. And, my grandkids are what keep me grounded, though. For sure.
Yes. Yes, I've got some of those, too. What's the biggest challenge moving forward for you?
I think the biggest challenge right now is for law enforcement. We have to get the trust of the community back.
Okay.
That is a challenge to do, especially with Unified Police Department, when we have agencies leaving, it's hard to keep everybody on the same page. So we're going to have to work really hard this year as law enforcement to gain that trust back from our public.
Well, Rosie Rivera, Sheriff of Salt Lake County, I, for one, am personally proud that you are my sheriff. And I'm really happy that you joined us for a few minutes to chew over some of this stuff today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I like your podcast. I've watched it. Well,
you're very kind. And let's do it again when either nothing happens or something happens, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Rosie.
Bye-bye.
All right, here's the guy I want to talk to today on your screen right there. It's Adam Sessions. He's with One Wire Fiber. I do business with him, and these telephones that I have in my office, he has installed. I'm at home right now. I have employees that are at home, and I guess that's what you do. You make it so I can carry my communications anywhere, and an employer can just pass out your telephones, and it's as if you're in the office and you're at home or elsewhere.
Absolutely. I'm also coming to you from my house.
Oh, you are?
It's a very normal thing that's now taken place, especially over the past, say, 90, 120 days. We've been actively moving our customer base and to their home offices as well. It's working fantastically.
That's right. They changed. Have you been really busy doing you moved me? It was nothing to it. I just took my phone home, and if I had a problem, I called up your guys, and they pushed buttons or whatever they did and made everything work. And that's what you're spending a lot of time doing, moving people from the actual office to the home office?
Absolutely. And in some cases, Bill, we don't even actually move their physical phones. They're actually using a web phone on their computer itself. So it's worked very well. We've had a lot of very positive feedback from it as well. So it's been good.
Well, it's as if I'm talking to my whole office right from my office at home. It's as if we're all together. One Wire. How did you come up with that name? One Wire Communications or One Wire Fiber?
It's a very, very good question. It's kind of a long story, but long about 2000, I guess, circa 2006. I had worked for a number of years in the telecom world. And one of the things that always confused me is that when we would show up to kind of formalize a relationship and turn a customer on for various services, there was always one hand that facilitated the actual phone system itself. And then there was the company that I worked for at that point doing the lines and the internet. And it seemed very odd that there were two disciplines that were there really doing the same thing. And that's where the concept behind OneWire came from, is really marrying both the service aspect of the phone numbers and the toll-free numbers and the carrying of the long distance and the phone calls with the physical phone system itself. It was really sort of marrying those two disciplines together.
Okay, and because you do, when you talk about two disciplines, if I'm understanding you, I know that you put fiber optics into my office, so it's really, really fast. However you do that, and then it's the phones are voice over internet, so the phone goes over that same line that you installed. So it's a fast line for all of my computing needs as well as my telephones, right?
Correct. So I kind of skipped over that part.
Sure.
Long about 2006 is really when voice over IP was sort of really in its infancy. And so what we're talking about is running your phone system for your business utilizing the internet. So rather than having traditional phone lines that are brought in and an internet connection, you're really sort of marrying those two scenarios to optimize your cost and to optimize your infrastructure as well.
Okay, let me ask you probably a stupid question for a guy like you. And that is, many of these voice over internet, some of my other clients that I talk to and whatever, you say hello and then you have to wait. There's a pause. But I have not noticed a pause with your services. Why is that?
Well, there's quite a bit of design and detail that goes into the application itself. And it's frankly sort of one of the things that separates us from the vast majority of the people that we compete with, is we're very much a boutique type of environment where the design and the implementation is really more the focus for us, rather than just simply shipping out phones and telling you to plug them in.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for us to get on an airplane, of course not in the last 120 days, to fly to a city for like a 10 or 12 phone install, just because we put the time and energy into the design and then the implementation and then ultimately the training.
All right. And you're located here in Salt Lake. How do I reach you?
So great question. 801-214-9000 is probably the easiest number to reach us at, but you can just do a quick Google search and find us at the number one wire fiber, and we're very easy to find.
Okay. And here, let me, the one thing I've noticed that you don't talk about, but it's so true, and that is if there's something goes wrong, one phone call and your people pick up, we don't have to push 2 for Spanish and, 1, 2, it's just, they pick up and they fix it. Anyway, I'm impressed with that. It's just my thing. So Adam Sessions with OneWire, I'm going to talk to you again because as this COVID thing keeps going and business starts changing to the home environment, I just want to see how you're doing and what changes you see.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Adam Sessions with OneWire Fiber. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, I want to welcome to the program now John Holland. He's the president and founder and big deal at All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air. And you have a new, can I call it a club? It's a loyalty program. You want to get to know people, customers, you want to get to know you. What is this? What, you got a point system going, I hear?
Yes, and it is a club. It's a service rewards club. And so it's a point system. So every dollar you spend, it could be $5, $10, $100, $1,000. Every dollar you spend is a point earned, and then you can use those points for future services. So basically, we come back out, you get these points, and they're valued at X amount of dollars, and voila, you get that off your bill. And sometimes it could even make it so that it's a free service.
Okay. Oh, that's the idea. Maybe I don't have a leak. I don't have an air conditioner problem or a furnace problem, but you might just come out and take a look at stuff. Is that the idea? And might do that for nothing, or how's that work?
Right. Yeah. So whatever they need, say they're like, hey, I just want you to check something out, like you were just saying, and we come out. Okay, there's a charge for that. Well, holy cow! Wait a minute, you got these points. It's nothing today, and we checked this out. Didn't find any problems, or did.
Okay.
And it's awesome.
I mean, it's $100 for any technician from any company to show up. I think, period, isn't it? And this might be a way of, you have something installed, a little loyalty program, and maybe that $100 goes away to come out and look at something.
Right. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. It's for our loyal clients and even new clients. Just everyone that's calling automatically gets how do you say, they're enrolled just automatically. There's no signing anything or nothing. You're just automatically, we track it here on the computer and the whole bit. And it's wonderful. We just rolled it out, and it will improve as we go.
Okay. Now, you also said something, I think, about someday, as this thing goes, you might start having drawings for, free TVs or whatever it might be among your members.
Yeah, as this gets going and we build traction and the company grows as well, then we really want to implement, okay, now let's do drawings on these existing clients. And hey, and then you send out an email, call them, hey, the drawing this month or whatever was, as your example, a TV. Yeah. Well, you're the winner of it. I'm looking forward to making it even bigger deals than that.
Well, that might be fun. You got a name for this program?
Yep, it's called Service Rewards Club. That's what we're calling it.
Oh, it is a club then, Service Rewards Club. All right. Well, let's see how this goes. We'll check in with you shortly. John Holland with All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air, and his new Service Rewards Club. Thanks, John.
Exactly. And don't forget, we have right now 20% off. If you call them, we get plumbing work repaired, 20% off, air conditioner repair, 20% off. Or even a sewer problem, you get that repaired, 20% off. We have great deals going on right now, along with not ever cutting our quality. All right. Thanks again, Bill. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, John. Thanks. Are you having a little bit of trouble, are you, with being isolated with all the COVID that's going on here? Well, I've got a couple of special guests you see on camera right there. Susan Matt, a history professor at Weber State University, and Luke Fernandez, who is in computer science there. And they wrote a book recently, and it's a year ago, 2019, I believe. It's called Bored, Lonely, Angry, Stupid, Changing Feelings About Technology from the Telegraph to Twitter. And you recently had an editorial in the Washington Post, which you're saying basically, I think, rejoice in our loneliness. Is that, how did I do?
Well, I think that's a fair synopsis. We argue in the book, and we argued in the editorial, that many of us may be feeling unaccustomed to the isolation of COVID, but there are ways we can reframe it that will help us get through the tough times of being so apart from each other. And if we look at the past,
you're the history person, and Luke is the computer guy. You're married, and that's why you co-authored this book, because you're trying to, are you not trying to merge these two things together and how we feel about ourselves right now?
Yeah, definitely. Susan has already written a couple of books. She's a historian of the emotions, but I'm much more of a technologist. And I, after reading two of her books, I was sort of saying, Susan, what about technology? How has technology reshaped American feelings, the way they feel about the world? And so that's what our new book is really about. It's a focus, at least in part, on technology and how technology has reshaped Americans.
I think some of the premises, correct me if I'm wrong, are Facebook makes us lonely, and selfies breed narcissism, and Twitter just makes us outraged at everybody else's opinions. So that's not healthy?
Well, we also argue that a lot of times we're blaming it on social media, and social media has certainly exacerbated our isolation, our narcissism, given new opportunities to express anger. But it's also part of a longer history that dates back to the 19th century in some cases. So there's lots in the popular press today that Facebook is making us lonely. We want to see how earlier generations had dealt with technology and if it made them more or less lonely, more or less bored, more or less stupid.
Okay. I mean, technology has made me smarter because my brain is as big as Google whenever I have a question. On the other hand, tell me how this fits into the whole issue of COVID and isolation and frustrations and angers. How do we meld those two together, if you will?
Yeah, well, I think don't we? I think I was walking down to campus the other day, and I passed a woman who was on her stoop, and I think she was just by herself, and she was just sitting out there, and I think she was alone in her house. She was the only person there, and she was just looking for some human connection that was missing from her life because she probably wasn't going to work, and so I think she's kind of emblematic of an experience that many of us are feeling, a sense of loneliness and isolation. And our article in the Washington Post, I think, was partly to remind ourselves of the way earlier generations responded to feelings of being alone.
Okay, and how did we do that? How did we do that earlier generations? When we, I guess, embraced this to some degree because we didn't have the cars and the technology and the airplanes to get us in touch with each other quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to romanticize the past, but certainly an emblematic figure from the 19th century is Henry Thoreau, who built a cabin on the side of Walden Pond and lived by himself there for 2 years and proceeded to use that time alone to good effect to write some of the more memorable tracts in sort of American thought. And he celebrated in his book, Walden, and his other writings, the experience of being alone. He described it as solitude. And that's a much more sort of positive description of aloneness than the types of words that we use today, which is we don't describe aloneness so much with the word solitude. We tend to use the word loneliness.
Yes.
And that's and that's not so much a product of technology. I mean, it is partly an experience that's been reshaped by technology, but it's also been reshaped by language. If you look at the frequency of use of the term solitude, it's declined in the last 200 years, whereas the term loneliness has risen. And so just the vocabulary that we use for describing these experiences has changed from one in which it was described positively to one where we describe it negatively.
All right, Susan, so has technology passed us by and made us more lonely? Because here's the thing. Back in Thoreau's day, they did not have automatic ovens and microwaves. And when they cooked a turkey, it was very, very dry. And I cook a turkey and it's very, very good. And so can we relate that to this, the technology? Is technology going faster than we are in creating this loneliness? Because I don't want to go back to Thoreau's day. I want a good turkey, if you see the metaphor.
Yes, and I think you can have a good turkey and maybe find ways to deal with the isolation of COVID and quarantining. Our book doesn't argue that we should give up all of our technologies, but it does say, technology has reshaped our inner lives and our culture has an effect on how we feel as well. And we should be really conscious of how we're using our devices and what values they're promoting, what thoughts they're promoting, what behaviors they're promoting. So we're not saying, throw out your cell phone, throw out your turkey roaster thing. But we are saying that not every pattern that's come along with Facebook is making us happier.
Thankfully, though, I push back to say we have technology because it's made me less lonely. I'm not touching people and hugging people and visiting them with them at taverns and restaurants and at their homes and whatever because we're social distancing. But technology has made it easier to stay in touch. It's, I think, made me less lonely. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. Can you imagine trying to endure this kind of isolation that we're going through without Zoom and all of these technologies that we presently have. I mean, the meeting that we're having right now, or late night with, it's not David Letterman, but
No, Stephen Colbert and all those guys. Yes, and they're operating out of their home, sure.
Yeah, and all of that is facilitated by all these technologies, so we shouldn't make too much light of them. On the same time, though, they do accustom us to always being connected with other people. Some of the people we interviewed talked about their sons and daughters who, at least in their view, the parents were thinking that their sons and daughters have never experienced a moment of being alone in their life, and because of these new technologies. And there are virtues in just spending time alone and experience that idleness that sometimes we describe with pejorative terms like boredom. But that idleness has virtues, and since we're unaccustomed to spending that time, when it creeps up on us, we're less able perhaps than our ancestors to adapt to it and to use it effectively.
Help me with what idleness is. Is idleness, does that include reading a book? Or do I have to sit on my front porch with my legs crossed and stare at, the tree?
Yeah, I think it's comparable, though, to sort of the same, if we use loneliness to describe aloneness instead of solitude. The same is true with the words, boredom and idleness. When we're not doing anything, we're more apt to use the term boredom, which has negative connotations, rather than the term idleness, which perhaps is less pejorative, has less pejorative associations.
Maybe more like meditation, embrace meditation, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we talk about in the book is the word boredom doesn't even exist until the 1850s.
What? They didn't have the word boredom?
No, they had bored and boring by the 18th century, but boredom didn't exist till about 1850 something.
I had no idea. Okay. So it's
talked about like the tedium of life. They might say this is dull or this is monotonous, but it didn't have as much unhappiness wound up in it. They just didn't have expectations for constant excitement. And today we do have expectations that we should be constantly entertained. That would befuddle our ancestors who expected monotony as part of the human condition.
But the surprise you register is, something that everyone does when we relate that fact. It's just because we think of boredom as something that's just almost natural and that's always been around.
I seek to not be bored.
But I think what is indicative of is that language, the words that we choose to describe our experiences aren't just a reflection of those experiences, but reshape our emotions, just as our technologies do.
All right. Well, Susan Matt and Luke Fernandez, the book is Bored, Lonely, Angry, Stupid, and the subtitle is Changing Feelings About Technology from Telegraph to Twitter. How's the book done?
It's done pretty well. It comes out in paperback next week, and it's being translated into Korean, so we're excited about that.
They're bored too. They have great technology. It could be translated into a million languages. Thanks, both of you, for joining us on the podcast today. This is really informative, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. A pleasure.
You bet. So that's the podcast for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd really like to hear from you. Who would you like to hear from? Because, I have access to just about anybody you want to hear from. And I also want to thank our sponsors one more time, the people that make all of this possible. First, All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air, One Wire Fiber, Dream Dental Implants, and ES Solar. I will see you next time.